Hi, I'm Karen Rogers. Thank you for joining me today for video vlog number 23. Today, let's talk about the moon. We'll talk about the phases of the moon, tides, and eclipses. Now, there are a lot of good videos out there on YouTube that will demonstrate what I'm going to talk about better, but what I will do is combine a lot of different videos, and I have a homemade model, a chart, and an activity that you can do with kids, or if you're an earth and space science teacher, or if you're just a science nerd and like to do this stuff for fun, I'll show you some activities about the moon as you get the education. I educate and entertain and motivate. All right, let's get started, and let's begin by talking about how everything is in space. This is my homemade model. If you watched the winter solstice video, this should look familiar. This is my flameless candle, which represents the sun. Here's the foam earth with a pin in it, and this is right in the middle of the United States where I'm located. And right now, the earth, remember, is tilted at a 23.5 degree angle. And so as it's rotating, the northern hemisphere right now is experiencing a lot of daylight hours. As a matter of fact, on Wednesday is summer solstice, which is the longest day in terms of daylight hours for the people in the northern hemisphere. And then, of course, as it rotates around the sun throughout the year, this is winter. And then, all right, you can see that video if you want to review the way the earth rotates around the sun. Now let's talk about the moon. I added a moon to this model. This is 2 pipe cleaners. There's one that just supports it, and then the second pipe cleaner is just wadded up, and it represents the moon. Obviously, not to scale, but you get the idea. The moon, it rotates. It's our satellite, and it revolves around us like this. It has enough time to revolve around us about 12 and a half times per year. It takes 29 days to make one revolution. That's about a month. And you're saying, wait a minute, 29 days isn't quite a month. There's 30 or 31 days. So because of that, there are times, it's rare, but there are times that we could see 2 full moons in a month. When that happens, the second full moon is called a blue moon. And again, it's rare, but it's fantastic. And now you know where the term once in a blue moon, you know what a blue moon is and where that expression comes from. So let's talk about the phases of the moon. First, you have to understand that the sun is the only thing that is giving off the light. The earth and the moon at any given time are only half lit. And we only see half the lit up side, and we don't always see that. So I'm going to put us right here facing this way, so it's night on this half. When the moon is in this position, we don't see it, and it's called the new moon. And right now, actually, as I make this video, we are in it's almost a new moon. It's actually right here. It's in the waning crescent phase, but next Saturday it'll be in the new moon phase, and we won't be able to see it. Now, as it makes its rotation, we get to see just a little sliver of the lit up side, and that's called a waxing crescent. When you wax, things get bigger, right? Remember, waxing means to get bigger. So you've got the waxing crescent. Here in this position, it's called the first quarter because we can see half of the lit up side. And then it's a waxing gibbous. In this position, it is the full moon when you can see that lit up side. It's so beautiful. And then you have the waning gibbous, the third quarter moon, the waning crescent, and then the new moon, and it starts all over again. Now, if you'd like an activity, I found this meme on the internet, and I just printed it. And it says, there is no dark side of the moon, really. Matter of fact, it's all dark, which is true. And we'll talk about that lyric at the end of this video. And these are cookies down below. These are just Oreos, and I scraped off the frosting. And so you can see this is your waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, third quarter, waning crescent. And then I put the new moon in to show how the whole cycle starts all over again. So that's just a fun little activity that you can do. And then you can be creative with this activity. This is one with Ritz crackers and peanut butter. And so this cracker that has no peanut butter is the new moon. And then I've got a crescent, just a little peanut butter on the edge. And then, of course, my favorite is the full moon with all the peanut butter on the Ritz cracker. So you can be creative. Use frosting if you want to frost, or however you want to do it. But that's just a little activity to demonstrate phases of the moon. Now let's talk about tides. We'll put the model back here. Well, first things first, you have to understand gravity to understand tides. Now, you have to respect gravity. So, whoa, hey. Right? Gravity. Gravity is a force. Gravity is a force, and it pulls on things. And when you hit the sun and the moon and the earth, all pull on each other because of gravity. When the moon is in this position, or in this position, the moon and the sun are pulling on the earth. And so the water level will recede or go out as much as it will. It's basically being pulled, and then it comes back in, and they call these high tides, and they're also called spring tides. All right, so the tides are definitely affected by gravity. And if you, say, live here, and we don't really have a lot of water, but if you're in a place where there's a lot of water, of course, you'll notice it, and the tides go in and out in 12-hour cycles, because you would have, the tides will recede, and then they come in, and then they go back out, and then they come in, and then they go back out, and then they come in 12-hour cycles. When the moon is in this position or this position, they're called spring tides. Just think of a spring. It really pulls on the water. And then when they're in this position at a 90-degree angle to the sun, or a 90-degree angle here, the tides don't ebb and flow quite as much, and so these are called neap tides. So spring tide, neap tide, spring tide, neap tide, spring tide, neap tide. You get the idea, right? And so now hopefully you can understand tides a little bit more. And then the last thing we'll talk about is eclipses. All right. Sometimes what will happen is the Earth will block the sunlight that's going to the full moon. And so you see the eclipse, which of course makes you want to howl like a werewolf, right? And that's a lunar eclipse. On the other hand, sometimes what will happen is the moonlight will block the sun coming to us, and that's called a solar eclipse. And we have a big solar eclipse coming on August 21st. I know the Chamber of Commerce, you can see it real well here, and so it's a big deal and something to look forward to. You'll see a lot of hype about that solar eclipse that's coming August 21st. Now you might say, how come we don't get to see eclipses very often? Because we don't. And it has to do with, of course, this isn't exactly, the moon's a lot smaller and there's a lot of space, and the moon's orbital plane is tilted a little bit, and so the shadow they don't always line up. So what has to happen is, to see an eclipse, it depends on how everything is lined up. It depends on where you're at in the earth, what time of day it is, atmospheric conditions. And so eclipses are rare to see, and so when you do get to see them, a lot of times people have a big party and to view it. The other thing about viewing the moon that you might want to think about is sometimes, well, how come it looks bigger when it's on the horizon and smaller, or how come it looks red sometimes? And that has to do with how the light is refracting. It's kind of like it goes through a prism, kind of, so it looks reddish. And when it's on the horizon, it looks bigger. And it's also how we perceive it. And so there's different factors as far as why does the moon look a certain way, and how come you can't always see eclipses. So that's just a general look at the phases and the tides and the eclipses. And I will finish today with just, we'll talk about the moon. It's math, it's science, it's art, it's literature. It invokes spirits, it invokes feelings of romance and spirituality. And some quotes, there's so much about the moon. There's one quote that says, people are like the moon, we all have a dark side. And then I think of the moon as like it represents faith, because you don't always see it. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there, right? To finish up today, I am going to use a piece of music. This is from the legendary album Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which is where that lyric that we talked about earlier. So that came from Pink Floyd's album. And this song is Eclipse. It is the final song of the album, and it's kind of like the climax of the album. So I'm going to finish with this song. And all that is now, and all that is gone, and all that's to come, and everything under the sun is in tune, but the sun is eclipsed by the moon. Great album. I'm Karen Rogers. I educate, motivate, and entertain. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.